Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Joree Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Joree is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Joree.
Hey everyone, I wanted to hop on before the start of this episode to let you know that I am opening the doors to an exclusive Journey Forward Immersion coaching package. I talk about this at the end of the episode, but wanted to give you the heads up that this has never been before offered, and it is a deep dive of doing spiritual, therapeutic, mindful, transformative work to help you live the fullest expression of your soul's purpose so that you can live freely, abundantly, and fulfilled. So you'll hear a lot more in the episode about some of the work of what that would look like, but I wanted to give you the heads up just in case you didn't make it to the end of the episode, that you didn't hear the offer of this door opening. And I am so excited about this offer because the transformational possibilities are really huge. And if you are someone who is seeking to live a life in which you get to be authentic and free from unhealthy habits and patterns that keep getting you stuck and it's affecting your relationships, your career, your health, then this might be something you're interested in. If it is, there's a link in the show notes to message me, and I would love to hop on a call with you to explore the possibilities of becoming part of the exclusive opportunity for a Journey Forward Immersion. I am only accepting 5 clients at this time, and the doors will not open again for this until after the first of the year. So with that, I hope that you really enjoy this very vulnerable episode in which I share much of my recent journey, all in service of this very work, to live fully, authentically, and freely. Enjoy the episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Journey Forward with Joree Rose. So today is a continuation of the solo casts that I have been doing the past couple of weeks that have highlighted and reflected upon where I am at in my own life and journey at this point in time. If you listened or maybe have seen in just the schedule of episodes, a couple weeks ago, I talked about motherhood being a mindfuck as a reflection of a transition I was going through in my own motherhood journey, which then led to the following episode of life itself is a mindfuck because of the challenges we face ongoing and how even in the best intentions and practices, we find ourselves in suffering and facing hardship and drawing upon all of our tools. And many times when we feel like we're just beginning to figure it out, life throws us a curveball. And today is a continuation of that journey, as you might be able to hear in my voice, and I apologize any times throughout this recording that I clear my throat or cough, because in the midst of all of my journey that I have been going through and working through, I got COVID again for the 3rd time. And this has been another, again, excuse me for clearing my throat, another curveball that life has thrown at me, in which I get to get curious around not why is this happening, but rather what am I here to learn? So this is the very first of points that I'd like to make in this episode is we always have a choice. And I know I've talked about this many times before. If you've been listening to the podcast for any length of time, there are definitely themes that I continue to carry through because they are just that important for how we respond to whatever it is that's arising in this present moment. And it's very easy to look at our hardships, our struggles, whatever form of suffering we're facing in the moment from a viewpoint of, and I hate to say this word because it sounds like there's self-pity involved and may or may not be true, but I'm going to say it anyway, from a place of victimhood. When we are responding from a place of victimhood, it feels like life is happening to us. And when we feel like life is happening to us, we feel a lack of control. We feel an insecurity. We feel kind of that downtrodden, the universe does not have my back sort of feeling. And when we're stuck in that worldview and in that mindset, it's really easy to communicate to ourselves or even to others through the lens of, why me? Why does this keep happening? And as long as we continue to adopt the, why is this happening? We stay in suffering. And it doesn't allow us to step outside of our own situation to get really curious. So, just on the heels of some very difficult weeks, and just on the evening of, I think I shared in my last solo cast, it was Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, in which I was performing and practicing ritual of setting intentions and releasing. Here again, once again, get sick with COVID. And this was only 5.5 weeks after I had previously tested positive. And when I started not feeling well, I thought for certain, this can't be COVID. Not again. I just had COVID. Haven't I suffered enough recently? How did I get sick again? What about my immunity? This couldn't possibly be COVID again. And as my symptoms kept increasing, not to mention of the 3 times now that I've had it, this was the worst of the 3. Whereas previously I felt like I had a bad cold, this was a bad flu. Fever, body aches, chills, no energy, coughing, stuffiness, the whole thing. And the first time that I had actually been alone through the process. Previously, my kids had been home and our lovely caretakers. So it would have been really easy and also understandable for me to get stuck and stay stuck in the mindset and in the viewpoint and in the suffering of, why did this happen? Anytime we are asking the question, why, we are actually in resistance of acceptance. Now, again, I've likely mentioned this many times before. Why can be seen through 2 different lenses. One is, like I said, through resistance of not being able or willing to accept what's arising in this present moment. But we can also ask the question of why from a true curiosity. When we can view our situation from an observer standpoint, to distance ourselves from not being in the middle of that spiral, in the middle of that cycle of reactivity, in the middle of a trauma-informed worldview, which I'll get to in a few moments, and truly observe and say, wow, this is really interesting. I'm curious. What is the message here that I need to be learning? What is the theme that I can extract from these struggles that I can take with a humbled curiosity to gain insight to say, oh, that's really interesting. This happened again. Okay, what am I here to learn from this? And that ability to maintain curiosity is a hallmark of a mindfulness practice, one in which we are able to not be in resistance, to not judge what's arising, even though judging is human, but rather to come from a lens of compassion and self-compassion with a deep-seated curiosity to say, I can't control what's arising. Okay, so this is here. And what I do have is control over what I do with it. So when I got afflicted with this virus again, at a time in which I was seeking renewal based on the new year and the intentions I had set of releasing and the deep work that I've been doing, I was faced with an opportunity. I could sit here and feel pity and sadness for myself and frustration, or I could get curious and I could get still. And in my stillness, I could dig deep. And that is what I chose to do. There is also a notion in Buddhism that, if you've heard me on the podcast in the past, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this idea of the first dart and the second dart. The first dart is simply what life throws at you. It's those curveballs. It's the things that we don't want, we don't like, what we don't want to deal with, what we don't want to accept. It's just life. The second dart and every subsequent dart thereafter are the ones that we throw at ourselves, the ones in which we are in resistance, in judgment, in suffering, in victimization, in a lack of awareness, in externalization. Those reactions simply keep us spiraling. That is what causes our suffering. It's not the first dart. It's not the curveballs that cause our suffering. It's how we deal with them. And if you follow me on social media, you know that I talk so often about the power of meditation. Well, the reason I find meditation so powerful is it serves as a foundation to build in the muscle, to strengthen the muscle of observing. The more we can build the muscle of observing what's arising, the more able we are to respond and not react to it, which gives way to a more mindful way of being in the world, right? So meditation forms the foundation of mindfulness. And mindfulness is not the end goal. Just to be able to be in response and not reaction, that's not the end goal. The end goal is to free ourselves from the reactions that continue to cause us our suffering. So I keep getting a lot of opportunity to practice these days. The Buddhist notion would say, bow down to your challenges, for they give you reason to practice. This is not a dress rehearsal. We are here in our one and only precious life to live fully, to live authentically, to live free. And when I say to live free, what do we want to be free from? Well, to not be reductionist, to be free from the things that cause us suffering. So as I sat in my quarantining, very sick and feeling that this was an opportunity, I decided to dig a little bit deeper. And ironically or not, some of the themes that I decided to work on during this time are very much in alignment with the work I've been doing over the past 6 months with my amazing coach, who is both a business coach, but in recognition that in order to become successful in business, we've got to clear out all of the energy preventing success from abundantly flowing. And success is defined for me in a variety of ways. And so we can't be successful in one area and expect flow when there might be other energetic blocks preventing such flow. And in that energy work I've been doing has been digging deep into uncovering with curiosity the patterns in which I continue to feel stuck. Maybe they're relationships, the patterns in which I feel have been a little bit bigger than me. And there have been a variety of opportunities to allow all of this awareness to coincide. And there are no accidents, one of which is a podcast interview I have coming out in a couple of weeks, which has given me great insight into some of this bigger picture. But if you get stuck in repeating patterns, I invite you to get curious around the transgenerational trauma that you may be getting stuck in. So for those of you who don't know what transgenerational trauma is, or even if that sounds like a big, scary, daunting, I'm doomed based on challenges of my ancestral past, it doesn't have to be that big and scary. Transgenerational trauma is how the trauma of our ancestors gets embedded and passed on in our DNA. There is plenty of research around this, that the suffering of our ancestors changes the expression of our DNA. It's called epigenetics. And we can look for collective understandings of this. There's a lot of research, for example, on Holocaust survivors, or even from World War II, there's a big Dutch famine, and 2 generations later, how response to metabolism was changed based on a generation being famished. A simple study done on rats, in which a rat was exposed to a smell of a plant and then was given a shock. And very much like a Pavlovian response, the introduction of this plant produced a spike in arousal, as if in anticipation of the shock. So just the presence of this plant produces the anxious and fearful response. The epigenetics of that was passed on in the grandchildren rats, in which they express the same hyperarousal when being exposed to this plant. So there's a lot of evidence that our generations past, whatever suffering was incurred, has gotten embedded and often unconsciously passed on. So the first invitation is to get curious around the things that you struggle in or get stuck in your life. What are patterns that might be deeply rooted in the generations that came before you? When you can gain this curiosity, it can give you greater insight into the patterns that have been playing out through, in part, epigenetics, but also in part due to the unconscious worldviews of your family of origin and previous generations before that, that you have unconsciously agreed to because that was just a matter of surviving. The challenge is when these old worldviews based on the past are out of alignment with who and what you want to be in the here and the now. So this may all sound kind of esoteric, but I want to try to make this concrete, because this is not only work, like I said, I've been working on clearing in my own life, but it's become a large source of the work I'm guiding my clients in, and a large part of what we did on my women's retreat in Sedona recently, which is to gain greater awareness of the unconscious agreements that we have been subscribing to in how we live our lives. So let me make this concrete. I come from a place in which there had been suffering and trauma, and it was a worldview, or is a worldview, that we suffer, that the world is not a safe place, that trauma exists, that our plans do not manifest because we are victims to traumatic circumstance. And for many instances in my family's origin, those were true. And as long as I agreed to believing those things to be true, I was preventing the opposite from becoming true. So those were examples of unconscious agreements that I was believing about myself and about the world that was preventing me from breaking free of those patterns. So when I once again got sick with COVID, and I was in a space to deeply reflect and get curious, I delved a little bit further into looking at my own transgenerational trauma and the ways in which I have been carrying out the suffering of my past in the form of believing certain things about the world, about money, about relationships, about myself, about success, about abundance, that are the very opposite of how I actually want to be living my life. Because the truth is, my personal worldviews are quite opposite than those trauma-informed worldviews of my generation's past. And I believe I got COVID partly to get really, really, really still because it forced me. And I've been getting messages from the universe to slow down for at least 10 years. But this time was different. I was given the gift to slow down so I could get really curious and therefore really clear on what was I believing that was preventing me from making forward strides in my life. And the irony is that I was unconsciously holding on to beliefs that was the exact opposite of what I was wanting to create. So COVID to me represented toxicity that I was being afflicted with because I was allowing certain patterns to continue. And like many things, we cannot change what we're not aware of. And once I became clearly of the toxicity I was allowing to stay, the more I would stay stuck. But my awareness alone is almost enough, plus a whole lot of should have work done. Awareness is the first step. So I invite you to get curious. One area is the transgenerational worldviews that you have been unconsciously subscribing to that are holding you back from living fully, living freely. And when I say free, I mean free from those tethers that hold you to the path, preventing you from living the fullest expression of your personal soul's journey. Now, here's a challenge. When we look at that, one of the conflicts arises that letting go of those collective worldviews from our family of origins inherently breaks a tie and therefore some connection from our family of origin and previous generations. So there is an inherent snipping of the apron strings, so to speak, and untethering that can temporarily feel like rejection of where you come from by adopting a new worldview. And yet, when you break that tie, it gives you the freedom to re-engage consciously with choice, with freedom, with independence, with your full availability of how you want to show up in your life in relation to your past, to your family of origin, to your ancestors, but most importantly, to yourself and to your future. So the language that I had been saying for a while, which has become very common in my world speak these days, is to get clear on what am I no longer available for? And I love the power of language as it really impacts our experience of what's arising. So whether it's deeply rooted transgenerational trauma, or whether it's how you are energetically showing up in your life, or how you are showing up in your relationships, or how you are throwing second darts at yourself, or how you are staying stuck in a negative mindset, whatever the patterns you recognize that you are stuck in, I invite you to say the language, I am no longer available for, and then fill in the blank on what that pattern is. For me, I am someone who I recognize has been dealing with some codependence, in which the desire for connection superseded the expression of my own authenticity, for fear that my authenticity might lead to disconnection if it led to an argument or conflict. I am no longer available to abandon my own self in favor of putting somebody else's needs first. So that would be me acknowledging that I am not available for patterns of codependence anymore. Here's an important piece of this. In order to let go of what you are no longer available for, it is helpful to have some insight and curiosity and compassion to how this pattern once served you. In order to let something go, understand why you developed the pattern to begin with. Maybe it was simply transgenerational trauma you were playing out, but perhaps the pattern of codependence kept you safe at a period of time. Likely, our unskillful habits and patterns that are showing up now were once skillful, if nothing else, for means of survival. And when we are part of a tribe, whether it's a family, a community, a congregation of sort, whatever community we are wanting to stay connected to, it makes sense why we have some form of codependence, of giving up of our own needs in service of the higher group. And that works until it no longer works. So saying the statement, getting curious, I am no longer available for. Well, for a while, I stopped there. I am no longer available to abandon my own self in favor of putting somebody else's needs first. And that to me was a really helpful statement of getting clear on what I was not available for. My availability when I was in a pattern of codependence was based on an unconscious agreement I had made to those who I was in relationship with. The unconscious agreement was, my needs are not as important as yours. To speak my truth is scary. I fear rejection for speaking my truth. Those were unconscious agreements that I made in my relationships that were derived out of some trauma-informed place that connection to the other was more important for my own personal survival. So you can see how this all goes together. Once I learned that both could be true, that I could speak my truth and stay in connection to other, into the group, then I was able to step into my own individuality, power, and release those old patterns. And to stand in my truth of being worthy, of having a voice, of speaking my needs. So then came the next powerful shift. I thought it was enough to say, I'm no longer available for fill in the blank. But as long as I say what I'm no longer available for, it actually keeps the focus on the very thing I'm no longer available for. Which, if we look at law of energy or even law of attraction, if I'm driving down the street saying, I don't want to make a red light, I don't want to make a red light, I don't want to make a red light, you often find yourself making a lot of red lights. The energy you're putting out to the universe is red light energy. By saying I'm no longer available for the very thing you're not available for, keeps that focus on the negative. It's a step, it's acknowledging your path, but it's not quite there yet. A reframe that has come to me from Deborah Fryer, who is going to be on the podcast in a couple of weeks. She was a very pivotal piece in all of this for me. She said, Joree, just no longer saying what you're no longer available for, that isn't enough, because it's keeping the pattern alive. Even though you are more conscious of the agreement, it's still keeping it alive through the negative lens. So the next piece of the work, the next shift is to say, here's what I am available for. So rather than saying, I'm no longer available to abandon my own self in favor of putting someone else's needs first, I am available for speaking my truth in partnership. Does that make sense? Can you hear the difference? It's stepping into your authenticity from a place of awareness and a place of having healed a little bit of whether it's that transgenerational and trauma-informed worldview, or whether it's from a place of making the unconscious conscious, of not just simply being in reaction of what you don't want, but for standing consciously in full presence, in full self-awareness of what you do want. The more you can do that, the more your life is free from suffering, because you are acting with conscious awareness and not just in reaction to the things that were causing the suffering. So these past few weeks of me getting COVID for a third time was an opportunity for me to get really curious around, where am I doing the work that I'm not actually doing the work? Because I think some of the work I was doing was keeping those unhealthy patterns alive by simply just saying, I don't want those unhealthy patterns, rather than saying, I choose healthy patterns. It is a huge shift. And for me, the timing of getting sick again, feeling the worst I have felt while being alone, on the heels of probably the hardest month of my life in the most confronting way of facing my biggest challenges, to me was an opportunity. Had I chosen to stay stuck in a trauma worldview, a why me mindset, a this sucks attitude, I would have missed the ability for me to slow down, get really still, and really, really curious around, what am I here to learn right now? And I was here to learn how to free myself from the old worldviews that was keeping me stuck in some unhealthy patterns and holding toxicity in my body, that my body was forcing me to say, it's time to release. So I know this is one of the more depth-oriented, perhaps esoteric episodes. If you've got questions, reach out to me on social media. I'd love to hear them. I'd love to create conversation around this in a deeper way. But I believe this is a huge, if not core, part of the work. We do this so that we can live our freest, fullest expression of our soul's purpose, of what we're here to live, not just to stay stuck in the suffering of the past, not just be in reaction to what's hard, people, situations, circumstances, but to build a foundation of conscious awareness so that we can be in agreement to what it is we are agreeing to and how we live our lives. Owning your thoughts, Are your thoughts in alignment with who you want to be? Because anytime you are stuck in a pattern of negative thoughts that has taken you out of alignment of who you want to be, there is some form of agreement that you are agreeing to staying stuck in that old thought pattern. It's unconscious because you don't like it. Not liking it is the reaction, but not changing it is continuing to agree to it. Making the unconscious conscious, making the implicit explicit, making the unknown known, allowing you to choose consciously what are the thought patterns that I want to continue to uphold that are in service of my highest self. That's not to say you have control over the thoughts that come in, but you do have agency and accountability over your response to them. Same thing, you don't have choice over the emotions you experience, but you do have agency and ability to ride that wave of the emotion, to know what to do with them. You don't have choice over what is arising in your life. That is the first dart. But you do, despite how hard it is, have conscious choice in how you choose to respond. Because that is what you're agreeing to. If all of your second darts that you're throwing at yourself are adding to your suffering, you have unconsciously made a choice to continue to suffer. It could simply be because you've never been role modeled anything different. That is still an unconscious agreement. So I invite you to get curious. What are your unconscious agreements that you have been agreeing to that are not serving you? To state that in the form of what you are no longer available for, and then to flip it to what am I available for? And when you recognize that some of the unconscious agreements have been rooted in transgenerational trauma-informed worldviews, which means simply the things you were handed from your family of origin and before, you can recognize it's not your fault. Agreeing to some of those worldviews was in fact a means of survival and connection. And now I can create healthy individuation, release the worldviews that are not serving me, and cultivate or develop or create your worldviews, which means the way in which you see the world in a way that serves you, to serve as a northern star or a light post to light your way towards living fully in your highest expression of your own authenticity. So with that, I thank you for listening. I hope this provided some insight for you, at least some things for you to think about, some curiosities. And if you want to delve deeper, if you want to live your highest expression of your soul's purpose in this life, where you are free from the burdens of suffering, the burdens of unconscious agreements, the burdens of your trauma-informed transgenerational past, free from unhealthy dynamics that keep you feeling stuck. If you want to live free from patterns in which you feel continued toxicity, if you are no longer available for those things and don't know yet how to be available for what you do want to create in your life, well, then be sure to reach out to me, because I am opening the door for my Journey Forward Immersion, which is a deep dive into a 6-month coaching package in which we delve deep. This is not therapy. This is a deep dive. It's more than therapy. It's a combination of therapy and coaching in which we are consciously digging and looking for all of the things that have contributed to you feeling unfulfilled, unhappy, stuck, frustrated, disconnected in your relationships, because I guarantee that you and I together could get to the source of what's underneath all of this. And even if it's not done on an individual journey, I continue to give you guys all these resources because this is fundamental work for our happiness and for the health of not just us, but the health of our children and our children's children, to break the cycle of passing on what is not serving us. So there's a link in the show notes if you're interested in the Journey Forward Immersion. This deep dive is something I have been swimming through, and let me tell you, it is hard work, and I can't think of any better time to be doing the work because I know I am available for deep connection. I am available for individuation and independence, even in partnership. I am available for abundance on all levels, and I am actively working on clearing the cobwebs and cutting the tether strings that hold me to a belief system that says we don't achieve those things. I am no longer available to believe in the worldviews that prevent my health, happiness, and success in all levels. I am available for health and wealth and abundance and healthy patterns that support my authenticity and individuation and partnership. I am available for all of that. So I really hope that this has sparked some curiosity and, at the very, very, very least, given you some tools to get curious around what are you no longer available for, and choose to decide what are you available for. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I am humbled and honored to be any sort of a guide in any piece of your journey. So thank you guys so much for being part of the Journey Forward community, and I hope you all take care and be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Joree Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joreerose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.